When I first met Daniel, he was nothing more than my husband's colleague. At least, that's how it started. He worked with Mark at the firm downtown, the kind of polished office filled with glass walls, smart suits, and people who measured their worth in promotions and late-night emails. Mark often spoke about him, always in passing, always casually. Daniel landed us that big account, or Daniel's the only guy who doesn't lose his cool when things go south. To me, Daniel was just another name. Another one of those faceless people my husband surrounded himself with, the kind of men who shook hands too firmly at company parties and laughed a little too loudly at boardroom jokes. But then came that Friday evening. Mark had insisted on hosting a small dinner at our house for a few of his colleagues. I wasn't particularly thrilled. Entertaining his co-workers often felt like playing a part in a play I hadn't auditioned for. The perfect wife. The charming hostess. Smiling, nodding, pretending I cared about financial reports and office gossip. Still, I set the table with my best china, lit candles, and poured wine into crystal glasses. I wore a simple black dress, one that clung to me just enough to look elegant but not enough to draw attention. At least, that was my intention. Daniel was the first to arrive. I remember opening the door and being met with a pair of striking green eyes. They weren't the kind of eyes that just looked at you, they searched you, lingered as though they had stumbled upon a secret. He was taller than Mark, broader in the shoulders, with a quiet confidence that filled the space before he even stepped inside. "Hi, you must be Emily," he said, extending his hand. His voice was warm, steady, carrying just the right mix of charm and ease. "Yes, and you're Daniel," I replied, taking his hand. His grip was firm, but it wasn't the handshake I noticed. It was the way he looked at me, like he was actually seeing me, not just registering my presence. The evening unfolded as these dinners usually did. People arrived, laughter filled the living room, plates were passed around. Mark played the role of the charismatic host, cracking jokes and refilling glasses. I floated from guest to guest, making sure no one's plate was empty, offering polite smiles and the occasional witty remark. But every so often, my eyes drifted toward Daniel. And every time they did, I found his gaze already waiting for me. It wasn't bold or intrusive. It was subtle. A fleeting glance that lasted just a moment too long, leaving a warmth in its wake. I told myself I was imagining it. That he was just being polite. That I was reading into something that wasn't there. But deep down, a part of me stirred, something I hadn't felt in a long time. By the time dessert was served, the air between us felt charged. Not in a way anyone else would notice, but I did. It was there in the small exchanges. The way his hand brushed mine when I passed him the wine. The slight tilt of his smile when our eyes met across the table. When the night finally came to an end and guests began to leave, Daniel lingered by the door. Mark was busy saying goodbye to another colleague, so it was just the two of us for a moment. "Dinner was wonderful," Daniel said softly. "You really have a gift for making people feel at home." "Thank you," I replied, my voice quieter than I intended. Then it happened. That look. It wasn't just a look, it was an unspoken confession. His eyes held mine, steady and unflinching, as if he were silently acknowledging everything we'd both been pretending not to feel all evening. My breath caught in my throat. For a second, the world seemed to pause. The chatter, the laughter, even Mark's voice in the background, it all faded, leaving only that moment suspended between us. And just like that, it was over. He gave a polite nod, wished me good night, and stepped out into the night air. But I couldn't shake it. That look followed me long after the door closed. It followed me as I cleaned the dishes, as Mark rambled on about office politics, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Because in that look, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, something dangerous, intoxicating, and impossible to ignore.